In this video, I'll show you exactly how a therapy practice reaches $10,000 a month without burnout, without relying on insurance, and without becoming a content creator. So let's talk about what $10,000 a month actually means. Now, when people hear $10,000 a month, it sounds big and it sounds abstract. And when something feels abstract, your nervous system fills in the blanks with fear. But $10,000 a month isn't magic and it's not luck either. It's definitely not about hustling harder. It's just plain and simple math. So, at its most basic level, your monthly income comes down to three things. That's going to be pricing times the number of sessions times retention. So, that's it. So, let's make this concrete. So, if you charge $200 per session, you don't need a massive caseload. You're looking at roughly 12 to 15 sessions a week to reach $10,000 a month. And if you work with packages or longer term treatment plans, that number can be even lower because your income isn't resetting to zero every week. Nothing about this requires 40 clinical hours, seeing clients back to back all day, or sacrificing your energy just to survive financially. What usually keeps therapists stuck isn't effort, it's actually vagueness and a lack of planning ahead. So when the numbers aren't clear, everything feels risky, and that's when it becomes easy to tell yourself stories about why you can't charge $200 per session. So don't worry, I'm going to address that today, and I'm going to show you how this can actually become a reality for your practice. For now, this is the most important reframe that I want you to hold on to. $10,000 months aren't built by working more hours, they're built by structuring demand properly. So once demand is structured, income stops feeling fragile, and the entire business becomes calmer, more predictable, and actually sustainable. So I've been working with mental health business owners for a very, very long time now, and it really puts me at an advantage when it comes to having the data behind the trends that are forming or not forming in the market. And that's how I've been able to create this roadmap for anyone struggling to grow their practice revenue. I've went ahead and I've consolidated all the data and I've organized it into 7 main steps to make it easier for you, not just to consume this as a piece of content, but to actually apply it to your business. So let's get into the steps. Step 1, choose the right business model. This is where most therapists lose the game, and it usually has nothing to do with their clinical skill. So it comes down to the business model that they're actually building on. So there are 2 very different models operating in the mental health space right now, and they produce very different outcomes. So let's start with the one that struggles. That's the insurance-based model. So on the surface, it looks stable. Your calendar's full. You're booked weeks out, and you might even have a wait list. But behind the scenes, this model usually means high volume with very little control, income capped by reimbursement rates that you don't set, more administrative work as you grow, not less, and very little connection between how hard you work and how much you actually earn. So even when demand is high, income stays flat and burnout creeps in quietly. Now contrast that with the model that actually scales, the private pay model. Private pay flips the equation. Instead of volume, it prioritizes clarity. Instead of squeezing in more sessions, it focuses on commitment. With a private pay model, you work with fewer clients, but at a higher level of engagement. You control your pricing and your capacity, and your revenue becomes more predictable month to month, as well as growth no longer requiring you to sacrifice your energy or your standards. This is why 2 therapists can be equally skilled but have completely different outcomes, because at a certain point, effort stops being the constraint and the model becomes the actual constraint. And here's what I want you to remember as we move forward. You cannot outmarket a broken business model. So no amount of better branding, better content, or better ads can fix a structure that caps your income and drains your capacity at the same time. Everything else we talk about in this video only works after this decision is made. Step 2 is to specialize, or you'll end up competing on price. So I want to say this up front. If you currently say I help anyone with anything, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just not effective if your goal is consistent private pay growth. So when your message is broad, there's no urgency there. And when there's no urgency, people default to comparison, and comparison always leads to price. So specialization isn't about limiting who you can help. It's about making it immediately clear who you help best. And when that clarity is there, 3 things happen almost automatically. Trust forms faster, your work is perceived as more valuable, and referrals become easier and more specific. So instead of being a therapist, you become the therapist for a particular problem. So let me give you a few examples. Not I help with anxiety, but high-functioning professionals dealing with anxiety and burnout, women stuck in repeating relationship patterns, adults with trauma who've already tried therapy before and didn't get lasting results. Those aren't just niches, they're problems with context. And that context is what helps someone feel seen. This is the core idea that I want you to remember. People don't pay for therapy, they pay to escape a specific problem. The more clearly you articulate that problem, the less you'll find yourself defending your price because the value is obvious before the conversation even starts. Step 3 is to price for sustainability. Now, this usually is the hardest step, not because it's complicated, but because it's a little bit emotional. So pricing brings up guilt. It brings up fear of being maybe too expensive, fear of losing clients or being judged for charging more. So before we talk about numbers, I want to reframe what pricing actually is. So pricing is not a moral statement and it's not a reflection of how caring you are, and it's not a measure of your integrity as a therapist. Pricing is a capacity decision. It determines how many people you can serve, how present you can be with them, and how long you can stay in this work without burning out. This is why in a private pay model, rates in the $150 to $250 per session range aren't extreme, they're just functional. So at that range, you don't need an overwhelming caseload to be financially stable. You can actually think, plan, and show up regulated, and your work becomes more intentional instead of reactive. So this is also why packages and longer-term treatment plans matter so much. It's because they stabilize income. So they reduce the pressure of starting over every month, and they allow both you and the client to commit to real change, not just symptom management. So something else that is important is that fewer clients often lead to better outcomes. When you're not overextended, you're more present. When you're not financially stressed, you make better clinical decisions. And when clients are financially invested, engagement tends to be higher. So if you take nothing else from this video, just remember that if your pricing requires burnout to survive, it's not ethical, it's just unsustainable. Sustainable pricing doesn't push people away. It creates a structure where you can do your best work consistently over the long term. Step 4, create a simple client acquisition system. So this is where a lot of therapists overcomplicate things and then avoid them entirely. So I want to be really, really clear about this just up front. Client acquisition does not exist to be sexy. It needs to be simple and it needs to be repeatable. So a functional client acquisition system has just 3 parts to it: a clear message, 1 traffic source, and 1 conversation action. That's it. Most therapists don't struggle because they don't care about growth. They struggle because they're relying on things that are inherently inconsistent. So referrals, for example, are great, but they're not a system. You can't predict them, you can't scale them, and you can't plan your income around them. Social media has a similar issue. So posting content can help with visibility and trust, but visibility is not the same thing as acquisition. Likes, saves, and followers, they don't automatically turn into booked consultations or booked sessions, especially when there's no clear path to actually take action. What actually changes the game is having one intentional way that new people consistently discover you, understand who you help, and know exactly what to do next. That's where paid traffic can work, when the business model underneath it is right, not because ads are magical, but because they give you control over volume, consistency instead of spikes, and data that you can actually make decisions from. So you don't need to be everywhere. You don't need to try everything, and you don't need to reinvent your messaging every week. You need 1 clear message, 1 place where it lives, and 1 action that you're guiding people toward. This is the real principle to remember here. Consistency beats creativity when it comes to client acquisition. So when acquisition is simple and steady, growth will stop feeling so stressful and it'll start feeling a lot more manageable. Step 5 is to turn interest into booked consultation. So this is where most therapists leak money. It's not in their ads, it's not in their messaging, but it's right here, because interest is not the same thing as action. And if you don't design this step intentionally, you end up spending time with people who were never a good fit to begin with. So there are 3 different stages someone moves through before they ever become a client. Interest, they resonate with what you're saying, they feel seen, they're curious. Intent, they're actively considering help, they're weighing options, they're asking, is this for me? Action, they book, they commit, they show up ready to engage. Most practices treat those 3 stages as if they're the same, and that's really where things break down. This is why clear consultation framing matters so much. A consultation is not a free therapy session. It is a decision-making conversation. So its job is to determine fit on both sides and to clarify what working together would actually look like. So pre-qualification is what protects your time here. It ensures that the people booking a consultation understand who you help, are aligned with your approach, and are realistically able to move forward. So this is also why free consults only work with boundaries. Without structure, they attract curiosity rather than commitment. And with structure, they actually filter for readiness. So if everyone can book with you, the wrong people definitely will book with you. When your consultation process is intentional, fewer conversations lead to more yeses, and your time, energy, and income will all benefit at the same time from that. Step 6, retention is the multiplier. So this is the part that turns $10,000 months from something you hit into something you can actually count on. Because growth isn't built by constantly replacing people who leave, it's built by keeping the right people engaged for longer. So retention matters more than chasing new leads. When retention is strong, you don't need as much top of funnel pressure, your income doesn't reset every month, and your practice feels calmer and more predictable. So this is where treatment planning becomes an actual business tool, not just a clinical one. When clients understand what they're working on, why it matters, and what progress looks like, they're a lot more likely to stay, to engage, to commit. That clarity really reduces the anxiety for you and for them. So when clients don't know where therapy is going, dropout feels like the logical answer. And when they do know, continuation feels very purposeful. So this is the reframe that I want you to take with you. Growth isn't about adding more people, it's about losing fewer people. Now, there are cases where you do want to add more people, but for the most part, retention is really going to be the multiplying force. Strong retention multiplies everything you've already built. So your pricing, your acquisition, and your time without asking you to work harder to get there. And then step 7, the math that makes $10,000 predictable. So let's go ahead and bring this full circle. So when $10,000 feels stressful, it's usually because it's feeling a little vague. So we're going to make this very specific. Predictable income comes from knowing 3 things: how many clients you need, what you're charging, and how long people typically stay for. For example, if you charge $200 per session and a client comes in once a week, that's about $800 per month per client. Now that means you only need around 12 to 13 consistent clients to reach $10,000 a month. If some clients are in packages or higher commitment plans, then that number can be even lower. And if your average client stays for 3, 6, or even 12 months, your income will stop resetting and it'll actually compound. This is what makes revenue feel predictable instead of fragile. So you're no longer asking, will I hit $10,000 this month? You're asking, what do I need to maintain or adjust to actually stay there? And that is the shift that changes everything. So here's the anchor that I want you to remember at this point is that when you know your numbers, anxiety goes down and decisions get a lot easier because you're able to stop guessing and stop reacting. And you actually start running your practice from clarity instead of pressure. Okay, so before we wrap this up, I want to call out a few patterns that I see over and over again that for some reason have become very normalized in the mental health industry. And these are things that are quietly keeping therapists stuck even when they're working very, very hard. So the first is going to be underpricing. So charging less, it doesn't make growth easier. It usually just requires more hours to survive. Overworking, adding sessions to feel productive, but it often hides the real issue, which is that the model itself isn't sustainable. No niche. When your message is for everyone, no one feels urgency and price becomes the deciding factor. Waiting for referrals. Referrals are helpful, but they're not predictable, and you can't plan a business around something that you can't control. Treating marketing like an emergency lever. So only focusing on marketing when things feel slow creates cycles of stress instead of stability. Now, none of these mean that you're doing something wrong. They just mean that the structure needs to actually change. So once the structure changes, growth stops feeling like a constant uphill push and it starts feeling manageable. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be this: building a $10,000 a month therapy practice isn't about working harder or doing more. It's actually about choosing the right structure and then letting that structure do the heavy lifting for you. So when the model is right, the numbers make sense. And when the numbers make sense, decisions get easier and growth stops feeling stressful. So if this video helped clarify how a $10,000 a month is built, the next question is why this matters right now, or why does this matter right now? Because the mental health market is changing and not all practice models are being rewarded equally right now. So I already broke this down in another video on this channel. It's called The Mental Health Market is Splitting. In that video, I explain what's actually happening behind the scenes in the market, which practice models are getting squeezed, and which ones are positioned to win over the next few years. So if you want to understand why this step-by-step approach matters, and why timing matters more than most people realize, that is the video that I would watch next. I will link it in the description box below. So I hope you got some value out of this one, and I will see you in the next one.